Good afternoon. We are resuming our business session at this time, and so I want to remind you that we have unfinished work left over from this morning, and we will that will be the first pieces on our agenda, so I do want you to know that. And also, so I'm trying to find something in the agenda, so apologize. Is someone doing the prayer? Okay. Say that again? Okay. Jonah Ballesteros, who's a deaconess serving in the North Texas Conference. He comes from the Arapaho Church, I believe, is going to open our time together for our prayer. And so if we can move Jonah Ballesteros to the place so we can offer the prayers. So let us be in an attitude of prayer as we begin to pray together.
Panginoon, Lord, you give us the unwavering call to do justice. You tell us to defend the cause of the fatherless and the widow, to love the foreigner residing among us, to provide for the hungry, thirsty, and naked, to love our enemy. But Lord, it's overwhelming. We ask that your Spirit fill us with hope. Remind us that we are good enough for you, rooted and established in love, like a deeply rooted tree that can prevail in high-powered wind or rain. The storm may swell and destroy around it, but the tree can withstand because of the depth at which its roots are grounded. Leaves might be torn off, bark might be stripped, but the tree itself will likely be standing stable after the storm. Life is full of high-powered storms of wind and rain. Whether it is a demanding schedule, a busy season, unexpected turns, or any number of hurdles that we face, what we are rooted in will determine whether we will be standing after the storm has passed. Lastly, remind us to take up the call to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with you. Amen.
We're going to hear a retiree video at this time.
Taking my ministry out into the vineyards. I had no idea that existed. My world, as far as church was concerned, was in the four walls. And I have served several years as a DFW chaplain, ministering to people, giving them hope, feet on the ground, meeting people where they are, helping them to understand the love of Jesus Christ, just like John Wesley, making the world your parish. As I tell people all the time, your work is your worship. So wherever you go, just know that you take the Lord Jesus Christ with you, and you are his servant.
And Mary Brooke and I have always said that when it's time to write the book, it's going to be about Valley View. So we have pretty much an adventure every day. Lots of stories have come out of Valley View. We took 2 mission trips to Bolivia out of that church, and just rich blessing of great friends. And Farmersville was wonderful memories there. It's actually where I did my doctor of ministry work, and I had a great team of people, and we worked together for several weeks together, just studying and learning about our church and about its history and its symbols and its myths and its narratives and its culture and its history and all. And we really got to learn about God's working in the Farmersville Church.
I'd say probably the friendships I have made along the way, the churches I've served, the people that I've gotten to know and love, but also the number of camps that I have directed and mission trips that we have led. I also have the ability of, unlike some of my peers, say I served as an Army chaplain. So I had a great diversity in the ministries that I was able to take part in. And those are memories that I'll always hold, or those things that they taught me as well. As you look at the COVID experience, is that the best thing that you can do is constantly reach out. But through that, we started a sing-along time, we started a devotion time, we started the regular online services. But for the kids, one of the things that we offered was a weekly story time. On Wednesdays, we would actually do fractured fairy tales. We go back and do the Jack Tales, and to involve the church, we got kids of the church to actually dress up. If you remember the fractured fairy tales from the Rocky Bullwinkle show, that would dress up as the fairy and flutter out as they actually introduced me and introduced the story. And that got a lot of raves, but it also got a lot of attention. But it also made those kids and the parents of those kids feel like they were still actively involved in doing something at the church.
If you make people the priority, move beyond the four walls and find out what people's needs are, they will let you know what they need. I don't recall anywhere in reading the Bible when I was in seminary or cemetery, whichever one you want to call it, when I studied the Word, that Jesus told people to come to him into a building. He took the ministry out. He met the people where they were and met their needs. They didn't come to meet his. And because he did that, people knew that he cared. And that was where their needs got met. And programs, as we call it, were developed to meet the needs of those people. So if we can find out what the people's needs are by connecting to them, that's where the ministry takes place. That's where mission takes place. We're planted in communities for a reason.
In times of uncertainty, there's also times for incredible creativity, of things you have to figure out and learn and try. And if it doesn't work, you try again. And if you keep at it until you figure it out. When you're given a chance and an opportunity to serve in a town and country parish, go there with joy and a sense of adventure. And know that that experience will ground your ministry for the rest of your life. If you go there with the right attitude and the right joy in your heart, you will love those people. They will love you back. It will be you will have because you will be the pastor not only of the parish but of the community as well. It will be a crucible that will form you into a complete pastor.
Years ago, the bishop came up to the Sherman-McKinney district when it still existed, and morale was very, very low. And he pulled us all into a room out at Wesley Village there. And he gave us all a piece of paper, and he said, write your name on top and write the church that you want to serve. And as I sat down and looked at that, I realized what he was doing. It was very ingenious, because as I started pondering the church I was serving at that time, it dawned on me I was serving the perfect church. Every church that you're sent to is the perfect church for you if you sit back and remember that you're there because God has sent you there. There is an author by the name of Calvin Miller. Yes, he's Southern Baptist, but he runs around with the Catholics all the time. But he wrote a book called Letters to a Young Minister. I'd really recommend getting that book and reading that book, because as I look over my years in ministry, he gives hints and ideas to a lot of things that I wish there had been someone there to say, have you looked at it this way?
You're on a journey. And when you're on a journey, remember, the best part is not the final destination. Remember when you go on a trip, the most exciting part is planning that trip, because you're going to get where you need to go. And all of you are on a journey. You're going to get to the same place, but you'll all get there going in different directions. So go along the way. Stop. Smell the roses. Enjoy and embrace every appointment, every person, because God does not waste opportunities. He does not waste people. People and opportunities will come into your life as a lesson or as a blessing. Pay attention.
One of the things I enjoy about the retiree videos are the words of wisdom we receive from them, and I hope many people were preaching. There are a couple of things that were said I'm thinking should be said about every day of annual conference or several times. So I want to thank those who offered those reflections for us, and we'll see more of those. At this time, we're going to continue the work of this morning, but the report from the Journey Toward Racial Justice team. And so Edlin Cowley and Sylvia Wang are going to be presenting for us, and I think they're going to introduce Josh Manning about this work as well. So, friends, you're on.
All right. So Bishop and North Texas Conference, my name is Edlin Cowley. I'm the chair of the Journey Toward Racial Justice team. Happy to be here with Reverend Sylvia Wang, vice chair of our team. We're excited to share with you the work of the Journey Toward Racial Justice team since annual conference last year. It has been a very fruitful year, and we are grateful for God leading all of us in the work of racial justice here together in our conference. Last year, we introduced the theme of building bridges as a part of our work in the Journey Toward Racial Justice. We would like to share with you the 5 bridges that have been made so far, while other bridges are still under construction.
The first bridge that has been made is the Congregational Journey Toward Racial Justice. This falls primarily under our strategy of vital conversations. This was written and designed by a diverse team from the North Texas Conference and has been successfully launched in 11 pilot congregations in each of our 4 districts. The CJTRJ is a local church and individual journey. This is an in-depth, reflective work of congregations that begins with looking at the racial history of local contexts and communities in our conference. Through prayerful discernment and engagement in conversations, congregations decide on their plan for transformational work. As each congregation is unique in its history, setting, and context, how a congregation decides to make their journey toward racial justice is a special and unique journey with their own plan of learning, action, and advocacy to dismantle racism and work toward racial equity and justice. After the annual conference, all churches are invited to participate in the Congregational Journey Toward Racial Justice. If your church is interested in this journey, please feel free to contact me or Reverend Andy Lewis for more information.
When I first came to town, it was 4 years ago, I was concerned to find out that we actually have 2 ministerial organizations. There's the TMA and the TMU, and they're clearly divided. One's more for the white churches and one's more for the black churches. They're divided literally with a railroad track of all things. So literally the other side of the tracks is where a lot of the other churches are, the black churches. You know, for months, I would come here on Friday nights to help out, and I would drive. And the first time I actually walked from the church, which is only 7 blocks away, there was something transformational happening in my heart to walk literally in the same pathways. And sometimes the sidewalks are torn up or non-existent. The same pathways that many of the people here who have no car have no choice but to use their feet. I was walking with them in that moment. When I crossed the railroad tracks, there was just something that changed me and realized that we truly are neighbors. The key is to create an opportunity where it's not just about this little diversity group that's getting together to talk about loving Jesus and loving neighbors and going across the tracks. We've got to make that more of a church-wide emphasis. We've got to make it where we're having those conversations not to force it on people, but to allow people to experience this. I think we're in the early stages, but I think it's early enough to see that there is resistance, there is hesitancy about talking about race, and there's fear. And what we need to do is create safe spaces and opportunities where people can have conversations about race without being afraid of being called a racist or accused of racism, but just to have real honest conversations about the subject of race. And this journey can go forward then. My hope is that the journey will not just be an ending point somewhat, where my hope is the journey will be an ongoing journey beyond just this pilot phase that we have. And my hope is that the conversations will continue. One thing I definitely would love to see is people from both sides of the tracks coming together, not in big, huge rallies or big speeches, but in those small conversations that we can have.
The second bridge made in the journey toward racial justice is the process of ethnic local church itineration, which falls under our vital conversations and institutional equity strategies. Ethnic fellowships, congregations, and churches are invited to share with the Journey to a Racial Justice team about their visions of racial justice and what steps will help in bringing about racial justice and equity. Our team has formed sub-teams and will be conferencing with congregations by ethnicity that include African and/or African American, Latinx, Hispanic, Asian American, Pacific Islander, and Native American congregations. With the feedback from this itineration process, the Journey to a Racial Justice team will create and develop strategies for racial justice for ethnic local churches.
The third bridge made in the Journey toward Racial Justice is the Promise for Ministry Leadership Scholars Program, which is part of our commitment toward institutional equity. We are grateful for the Texas Methodist Foundation for a new partnership with the North Texas Conference in creating the Promise for Ministry Scholars Program that will launch in August. This program is designed to enhance the skills of our younger and newer ethnic clergy through a series of classes and experiences curated by TMF and taught by some of their leading teachers and experts. The vision for this program is for it to become an annual experience.
I hope that I can gain more experience and more knowledge that I can apply in my ministry context. And, I have been receiving already from Perkins School of Theology through my Master in Divinity, but I will be hearing from experts with this, which is a different, an expertise from people who have had experience in ministry, which is different from Perkins School. I don't know how to do capital campaigns or stuff like that. And being in a context, Hispanic Latino context, we usually in our churches have a lot of financial struggle. So I hope that I can gain more knowledge and help the executive board here in our church to move forward of how to look for more resources and help even more the financial struggle that our church has. But not only that, also as share that knowledge that I have been receiving, that I will receive with other clergy, Hispanic clergy that I have met. I think it's just amazing how God is moving through the conference, fighting racial injustices, especially around clergy. As a clergy, Latina, Hispanic, and woman, it's just answer prayer from my part to see how the conference and the cabinet especially is focusing their resources to support us. Many times we have felt that we have not been heard, and this is just an answer prayer that they are hearing us and are hearing what we need and to support in our journey in the call that God has called us to be.
The fourth bridge that is made is the virtual national cross-racial, cross-cultural training event. Under our strategy on intercultural competency, beginning in 2022, the Journey to a Racial Justice team, along with the Centers for Leadership Development and Church Development will become the lead partners with a cross-racial and cross-cultural ministry spring training event. This event has been curated, offered, and hosted by Reverend Edlin Cowley since 2018. This training event has grown larger each year and hosted over 125 people, including bishops, district superintendents, clergy, lay leaders, and laity in 2020 and 2021. This training will be offered to our North Texas Conference clergy serving in cross-racial, cross-cultural appointments at no cost, and will continue to position the North Texas Conference as a leading nationwide resource in preparing clergy for this unique ministry opportunity. 50% of the income from the training event will be donated to the Journey Toward Racial Justice and designated for the Promise for Ministry Leadership Scholars Program.
The fifth bridge is the GCOR, Racial Equity Inclusion Audit of the North Texas Conference. Beginning this spring, the North Texas Conference has started a series of audits focused on racial equality and inclusion in partnership with the General Commission on Religion and Race. This audit will help chart the course for the next phase of our journey toward racial justice work by highlighting the gaps in equity and inclusion that most need to be addressed. The first step of the audit involved the demographics and representation in the conference. GCOR representatives have facilitated conversations with groups of clergy and laity in the conference reflecting affinities with African and/or African-American, Latinx Hispanic, Asian American, Pacific Islander, East and Northwest districts, extended cabinet members, and Journey Toward Racial Justice team members. The summary from the audit will be shared on the conference website. Also, Zoom sessions about the Racial Equity Audit Summary led by members of the Journey Toward Racial Justice team will be open to all who are interested. We will have these sessions on June 22nd, July 28th, and August 26th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. More information on registering to attend these sessions will be available soon. The next steps of the audit will cover finances, the clergy credentialing processes, and policies and norms in the North Texas Conference. We anticipate the full audit to be completed by early 2022.
In looking ahead to what is to come, we know that our work in the journey toward racial justice is not done. Some bridges are in construction while other bridges are to be built. As Reverend Edlin Cowley moves into a new journey of ministry as the district superintendent of the Metro District, I would like to introduce to you our new construction workers. I will serve as the new chair of the Journey Toward Racial Justice team, and Reverend Joshua Manning will serve as the new vice chair of the Journey Toward Racial Justice team. We are ready
to get to work because we are excited to see how God continues to lead us in our journey toward racial justice as we continue to build bridges and to shorten the distance and increase proximity between people groups so that we can more fully represent the body of Christ here on earth and make God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank the team for their work that is ongoing. And if they told you a couple of dates, you'll hear more about them in terms of the equity audit that has been done. And the cabinet has looked at it for pieces of that. So I wanted you to know that. Oh, I believe we're going to have a retiree video again that we were to have earlier. And so we'll hear some wisdom from our retirees. And after that, I'll introduce our keynote speaker.
At the beginning of this journey, I had the distinct privilege of meeting with Tom Graves. He was my district superintendent. He was in the process of retiring as I was coming into the system. And he sat back in his chair and smiled, and he said, in all of his years of ministry, he had come to the realization that the lay people in the Methodist Church are the finest people he's ever met. He said, honor that. And I held on to those words. Those came back to me several times throughout my ministry.
As most conference folks know, I was fortunate to direct Crossroads Community Services really from the beginning. And the low-income families that worked with, their faith, their appreciation of the blessings they have, and some of them don't have a whole lot of blessings compared to so many of us in the North Texas Conference. Now, not all people. I mean, we have a broad mix under our umbrella as a church.
Clearly, the local churches that I've served, the members of those churches have just been great. And my love for the ministry that we do in the local church is what's been most important to me. Well, I think it's a tremendous time to create new and innovative ministries. And it's a critical time, I think, for those of us who affirm Wesleyan theology. So, in my own ministry, we've always emphasized service and missions for others. And I just see that still, the passion that United Methodist lay people and clergy have when they're really serving others and they know they're serving and loving God as well. So I don't know that we've done the best job of looking at pretty simple opportunities to reach out and serve. We've got the right idea of mentoring and tutoring programs in our schools and lots of other things, but I think we can do much more. And a real reaching out, serving others ministry will set a church on fire, and it'll set the lay people on fire as well.
Words, well, when I was at prior church, really didn't usually work well. My experience was that to get out in the community and get to know people and get to know what's going on in that community is how you learn what is needed in that community. I served in 2 suburban areas and 2 semi-rural areas, and they were all so different. I found that asking the district superintendent at the schools was a wealth of information of what's going on, what's needed, and how we could be the hands and feet of Christ in that community. And that we didn't have to do anything like everyone else. We needed to do what God was calling us to do in that community.
And this is I'm preaching to the choir, to everybody watching this video. I mean, Methodists are known for their work in the community. So I'd say keep that up. And not a mold of Crossroads, but generate more Crossroads type organizations, because people get engaged, they get their heads and hearts engaged helping others. And that makes the one commandment that I understand, love God and love our neighbors, come to life in real tangible ways in people's lives. The tricky part's how do you do that? How do you make the church relevant in the 21st century? And I personally am counting on the new ordinands to do that. And there's no quick answers in a video like this to do that. They have to get in the congregations, meet people where they are, learn, build the relationships, because when push comes to shove, church is all about relationship and valuing. Again, to me, value is a synonym for love, valuing people, the community in which they are, doing ministry and doing church. So when we meet people where we are, I've heard over the decades, church can move at a glacial pace, which we've seen with some issues in the church over the years and centuries. And I smile because yes, we got to move at a pace that works, but glaciers, we don't want to become relevant by the time that the glacier evaporated. So I throw that out there as a sincere challenge with the optimism that I'm trusting, hoping, praying, counting on them to do that.
The advice that I give everybody is to and this is new in the last few years, is to, as you grow in your ministry, just be curious, really, really curious. The pastors that I admire and have been the most effective, I think, through the years, have been pastors that are always curious. I don't know of anybody more curious than Adam Hamilton, especially in his early days. All he did was ask questions. And I'm a person who believes that there's such a thing as best practices, and we have to learn those. We don't just know them. It requires learning. We all need mentors and coaches. And so in terms of career advice, that's what I would say, is just continue to be curious and grow and know that there's a lot to learn, and learning is very, very satisfying and rewarding, fulfilling.
The two best pieces of advice that I think I ever received were from lay people. In my first church, a woman on my SPR approached me and she said, whatever you do, do not mess with the schedules of children and old people. So, to some degree, you need to mess with schedules at times, but I always held that and treasured that and tried my best to pay attention. And as I took care of my parents in their final years, I began to realize, even with far more acuity, as to why that's so important. The second piece of advice does not need a lot of explaining, but it was another one that I treasured a great deal. My lay leader at one of my churches made the comment that he said, sermons are like biscuits. They both taste better with a little bit of shortening.
Again, we're grateful for the wisdom of those who are retiring this year. I've always thought that my line has been, people prefer brevity over clarity in terms of sermons, so it's one or the other. So again, we're grateful for the retirees. It's my pleasure to introduce to you my good friend, Phil Amerson. We met 25 years ago. I began to calculate this the other day. He was already a member of a group called The Gathering, a group of pastors from around the country who are in larger membership churches, and I was asked to be a part of that group. And so I participated in that group until 8 or 9 years ago. I was drawn immediately to Phil because Phil was wise. He had a variety of experiences in local churches. His resume that you find in your booklet shows that. And he had so many different kinds of experiences in ministry that I thought sort of opened my eyes in so many ways. One of the things, though, that Joan thought it was very important for me to share with all of you, that we were able to go to Wrigley Field and watch a Cubs-St. Louis Cardinals game with Phil and Elaine Amerson because we were using the tickets of his daughter's boss, Mayor Richard Daley in Chicago. And you would think, those are great tickets. There's no bad ticket in Wrigley Field, but it was not behind home plate, it was in right field. And I want to say that it was one of the great fun experiences of my life. I have many baseball fields, Major League Baseball field parks that I've been to, many more that I have not, but I can cross Wrigley off the list, but I'll act like I haven't been there when I started on that. Phil Amerson he's a graduate of Asbury Theological Seminary. He got his PhD from Candler, from Emory University. He has served numerous churches. Phil stays more current than about anybody I know. And every once in a while, he and I will talk and he starts telling me something that's happening or something I need to know about. And I'm thinking, is this guy ever going to really retire? And thankfully to the church, he is not. And so I want to bring and introduce my friend, Phil Amerson, to us this afternoon. So thank you, Phil, for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop McKee. It is indeed an honor to be with you. And my goodness, I've already gone to church several times with Bishop Palmer last night. What's love got to do with it? Where is love? What's going on? I felt like I was reliving my youth. And then this morning, thank you, Bishop McKee, for that Episcopal address. It was really a gift for me to hear, and your emphasis on The distinction between certainty and clarity is one that I'll take, well, I appreciate it so much, and I think it's one that the church needs to hear. And then Dr. Cassatt, I've already told you this, but that was the best memorial sermon and the whole worship experience. It was worth coming all the way from Indiana just to hear that. And thank you for a remarkable time. I told Vic I slipped in the back, and I'm glad I was seated in the back, because as he was coming to the conclusion and naming the names of those being memorialized, I was weeping. Some of you may have heard me if you were near the back. Thank you. What a remarkable time. So it's after lunch, and I realize some of you may be nodding off, so I can tell you what this presentation is about simply by telling you about C.S. Lewis, who on June the 4th, 1941, was asked to preach at University Church, St. Mary's, Oxford. It's interesting because Lewis was not a preacher. He only preached 7 times. And this is one of those seven sermons. It's the middle of the Second World War. And Lewis made 2 statements then that I think are a summary of what I'm going to say. So you can listen to this, and then if you need to nap a little bit as I go through, you can do that. He said that if you're not puzzled by Scripture, and if you're not puzzled by the current situation, then perhaps you are just painting God in your own image. If you don't live with some sense of puzzlement about Scripture and about the current situation, perhaps you're painting God in your own image. And the second thing, more pertinent to what I want to share, Lewis said, next only to the Blessed Sacrament, to Holy Communion or the Eucharist, next only to the Blessed Sacrament, our neighbor is the holiest object presented to our senses. Our neighbor is the holiest object presented to our senses. I'm so honored to be here. It's always good to be in Texas. My dad is a Texas native. Dad passed away 8 years ago at age 93. But he grew up over in the Panhandle. During the Dust Bowl years, he graduated from Texas Tech. He's a Red Raider and always proud of it. And we used to travel through North Texas when I was a kid. So I have memories of Dallas area in those years. But I also remember my dad, who loved quoting John Gunther, who said, if a man's from Texas, he'll tell you. If he's not, why embarrass him by asking? I want to begin with a word of prayer and then a poem by Wendell Berry. O Lord, may now the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. You are indeed our rock, our strength, and our Redeemer. Amen. Wendell Berry penned a little poem that haunts me. It continues to stay with me. It's simply this: the seed is in the ground. Now may we rest in hope while darkness does its work. Recently, I was on a walk with a friend, and he asked me a question that most of you have heard. He said, is there a future for the United Methodist Church? I've heard it often, but this time it had a special kind of urgency. It was a question that I felt I needed to try to answer. Now, I confess I don't have easy answers, and if you came thinking I'm going to bring some formula or some fix or some solution, then please know that I don't have that. What I have is the simple offer that Jesus gave to the disciples, which was to follow him. And so this is an invitation for us to journey together on a trail to follow the Master, to follow Jesus as we think about our future. Today, we want to consider what it means to be rooted and grounded in love and what that may have to do with the future of the denomination. Tomorrow morning, we will consider being connected to bear good fruit and what it means then later in the third presentation, communities of restoration and joy. Our scripture is Ephesians 3 and then John 15. As we consider our context, let me begin by sharing with you my answer to my friend on that walk. The answer was, yes, indeed. I have no doubt that the United Methodist Church has a future. Now, as to what our mission, witness, and structure will be, here's a word of hope. We can choose the pathway forward. I believe our work is 100-year work. Too many pastors think that they can solve whatever the puzzle is that they face, with just the right formula, and we'll do it in 6 months. My friend Wes Jackson puts it this way: if your life's work can be accomplished in your lifetime, then you're not thinking big enough. If your life's work can be accomplished in your lifetime, you're simply not thinking big enough. Researcher David Scott notes that what is happening in the United Methodist Church is part of a much larger phenomenon that's going on. It is, in fact, happening in every denomination across our culture. Scott says it's shared by other denominations. It cuts across all races and classes and theologies. He writes, the United Methodist Church in the US and Christians generally are fooling themselves if they think that they can solve a cultural problem with organizational solutions. Scott concludes, I don't know what the adaptive solution to the cultural problem of US religious decline is. I wish I did, he says. But I am sure that understanding the nature of the problem is the first step toward finding a solution. Let me propose that our most hopeful options involve stepping away from the everyday concerns and looking at the larger question of the influence of the dominant culture on who we are. Douglas John Hall, speaking about mainline church or ecumenical Protestantism in North America, wrote, and this has been 20 years ago, Christianity has arrived at the end of its sojourn as the official, established religion of the Western world. The end of Christendom, he says, may be the beginning of something more nearly like the church. Now, I may need to define those words. Christendom is that dominant structure where everyone believes that they're part of a system that represents their nationality or their particular culture. But Christendom, Hall says, is in decline, but it may mark the opportunity for there to be a beginning for the church by stepping away from easy assumptions and practice patterns of the dominant culture. I believe new day for Methodism is possible. It can surprise and perhaps even delight us. Some of you remember the Czech statesman and poet Václav Havel, who put it this way: it is as if something were crumbling, decaying, and exhausting itself, while at the same time, something else, still indistinct, is rising up from the rubble. Philosopher Charles Taylor calls our complicated age axial time. And Walter Brueggemann speaks of this as an age of disorientation. cultural mores, norms, and religious beliefs are fluid at the best and disappearing entirely in many places. Many speak of this as an era of extinction when perhaps 1 million animal and plant species are at risk. Many of our institutions also appear to be at risk in the wake of a tsunami of disease, disruption, and disinformation. It's axial time. Here in Texas, you also were visited by a winter experience, we'll call it, in February. It was like a bad relative from North Dakota came and decided to spend some time. And not only plumbing, but electrical systems were damaged by that visit. This is the period of time we're in. Fortunately, scientists are already working on the next concern for a pandemic. And it begs the question, what about the church? As the pandemic began, United Methodists were distracted. There was a splintering that you heard a bit about, you know a lot about in your own local setting probably. Splintering around theological, ideological, and cultural differences. It diverted the energy and a lot of our resources. Unity was confused with uniformity. This is a moment, I want to say, for United Methodists to reclaim our motto at the bicentennial all the way back in the year 1966, when the Methodist Church that had been in the United States for 200 years at that time came up with a motto, which were simply 2 words, forever beginning. Instead of a return to normal, this is a time to step away from the languishing assumptions of old order Christendom and to begin anew. Deuteronomy 6 reminds us that we drank from wells we did not dig, and we eat from vineyards we did not plant. We have quite a legacy. Months of quarantine have given me the chance to think about this legacy. There's some remarkable folks who have provided guidance to us over the years. So today I'll be focusing some on our history. Tomorrow we'll look at the present and then the future. Did you know, for example, it was Charles Albert Tindley, Philadelphia Methodist pastor, son of a slave, hymn writer and scholar, who offered the inspiration for the hymn we sing, which is "We Shall Overcome"? Or did you think of Bishop Reuben Job, who summarized the Wesleyan general rule of discipleship: do no harm, do good, stay in love with God? And I have to mention Georgia Harkness, the first woman, by the way, to hold a full professorship in theology in the United States, who wrote, "It is the Christian's rightful faith that however dark the night, God's love surrounds us." So let's go back to another axial time, another time of disruption when Methodism was just beginning. It's maritime Bristol, England, 1742. Methodism is in its infancy. The new room is a worship center, a dispensary, and a school. John Wesley asks them how they're going to pay for the debt on this new building, and a Captain Thomas Foy responds, "Let everyone in the society give a penny a week, and it will easily be done." Someone interrupted. "But many do not have a penny to give," that person said. Captain Foy's response was, "Let each one give what they can weekly, and I will supply what is wanting." Others in that meeting made a similar offer to Captain Foy. They were concerned that nothing should prevent the poorest Methodists from being involved in the society. You see, what was envisioned as a financial building campaign morphed into a fundamental, essential ecology of early Methodism. It is simply a watching over one another in love. The society was divided into groups and leaders were appointed. The early Methodist polity is what researchers would call an adaptive change. Spreading from Bristol to London to Newcastle, you know, that was Wesley's Triangle Circuit. These class meetings began to emerge. Societies and classes became more like second families than a sect or a church in formation. Watching over one another in love became habitual. Note the three distinctives of early Methodists. They were, the poor were included in significant numbers. There was no need to set up an outreach ministry over there for them in that place. The poor were already present. 1739, you see, was the harshest winter in memory in England. And by 1742, the poverty and the disease was still rampant. People were marching in the streets asking for employment. The economic depression would go on for nearly a decade in England. So Methodism was birthed in the midst of that economic challenge. Secondly, weekly meetings for prayer and a watching over one another in love was seen as essential. The primary goal was a mutual accountability shared by all. I am not one who particularly holds to a paternalistic view of this. I think what was going on was everyone was seen to have strengths and everyone weaknesses, and all were needed for the class to function, for people to bring their gifts. And thirdly, as we said, someone interrupted. The person or persons who interrupted is not known. However, this was a critical shift in direction, a reimagining, a move from scarcity to sustenance. Today, do you know any righteous interrupters acting out of love for the least of these and for the benefit of all? I'm not talking about grumblers, the curmudgeons, or the chronically unhappy critics. Rather, I speak of those who see the gospel as having relevance in our time and our place. Methodist history is complex. I think of a young man in a trustees meeting. A group had asked to use the church's kitchen for a while. That group fed hungry people in town. And he was a righteous interrupter when he asked just one question. He said, "So let me see if I have this right. What we're saying is the church kitchen shouldn't be used to feed hungry people?" It was as if the whole scene changed. And the trustees who were ready to say, "No, not our kitchen, too many problems with utility costs and insurance and the rest." My friend Chris simply asked one question: the church kitchen shouldn't be used to feed hungry people? A righteous interrupter. Our history is complex, not always remembered with pride, but let me share with you a few righteous interrupters. There are two Methodists most people don't think of. First, as Methodist, Branch Rickey and Jackie Robinson challenged racial segregation in Major League Baseball. Before, by the way, Brown versus Board of Education, before the military was racially integrated. And there was, up in Hood River, Oregon, a pastor many have never heard of, Reverend Sherman Burgoyne, who decided that he was not able to keep silent as people in town wanted to take the names of Japanese American soldiers off the monuments there because, after all, the Japanese were our enemy. And Burgoyne not only fought that over the criticism and concerns of leaders in the community and in the church, but he helped with resettlement of Japanese Americans who had been in camps. And there are others that come to mind. In the book, Being Interrupted, Reimagining the Church's Mission from the Outside In, Al Barrett and Ruth Harley call for a counterflow in the way the church is understood. Rather than being a place for the spiritually thirsty to find a weekly refueling, they speak of a shift in circulation from the outside in. Worship overflows with stories from encounters outside the sanctuary with neighbors. Barrett is rector of Hodge Hill Church in the Diocese of Birmingham, England. He writes that worship begins with two interpretive questions. The first, what do you bring with you from your week in the world that you want to say thank you to God for? And secondly, what do you come with that weighs heavy on you that you want to bring to God in prayer and concern? Barrett writes, more attention is given to gathering than sending. The worship benediction has been changed. Now it is, let us go in peace to meet and love Christ in our neighbors. Anglican Sam Wells puts it succinctly. Prophetic ministry, he says, is not about condescendingly making welcome alienated strangers. It means seeking out the rejected because they are the energy and life force that will change us all. The challenge for the church is to see Jesus in the face of the ones we have rejected, and to let Jesus, the Jesus we discover in them, become our cornerstone. The first century church emerged in another axial time. Paul, a righteous interrupter, faced persecution and finally prison. Ephesians was a circular letter, written likely by a secretary or an apprentice or a close colleague of Paul, and sent to believers in emerging churches all across Asia Minor, challenging systems of polytheism, exclusion, shame, and honor, with a focus on neighbor love. In the prayer in Ephesians 3:14-20, there is this summons to be rooted and grounded in love, agape love, a specific word for sacrificial love used 17 times in Ephesians, unlike phileo, meaning brotherly love. Throughout the New Testament, there is this focus on faith made evident in agape love. And Georgia Harkness defines agape love, she says, means an uncalculating, outgoing spirit of loving concern, which finds expression in the deeds of service without limit. What does it mean to be rooted and grounded in such love? Well, I think it's the nurse that pulls a second shift to hold the hand of one who is dying of COVID when the family can't be present. It's the underpaid daycare worker or teacher who takes from her meager salary so poor children have books or supplies. It's those offering health care or food to refugees in Syria or Gaza. It's the young consultant who leaves his work for a while to run a shelter in the middle of a city for people who are without a house. It is the spouse, the child, or friend who sacrifices to stay near as a loved one moves through the darkness of dementia. These and multitudes of other ways show us the meaning. This morning, Bishop McKee talked about the pandemics that occurred in the early years of the church. Robert Jewett has a small little commentary on the book of Romans. It's only 1,140 pages. And in that commentary, he begins to uncover the question of why did Christians seem to prosper a little better than other groups? And Bob, by the way, who died of COVID in December, would argue that it was simply because they practiced that New Testament idea of offering a cup of cold water. John Wesley used Ephesians 3 as the scripture basis for his sermon, The Catholic Spirit. It's no surprise that he does that, and he writes in that sermon, we are to keep an even pace, rooted and in the faith once delivered to the saints and grounded in love, in true Catholic love, till we are swallowed up in that love forever and ever. So Charles Taylor comes to the end of his large book that was recently published entitled A Secular Age with a chapter that's simply entitled Conversions. He writes, the gospel establishes new links across boundaries, not based on kinship, but on a kind of love which God has for us all, agape love. Unlike early Christians, he writes, we moderns have given up on the possibility of human transformation. Have United Methodists given up on transformation? Are we too shaped by crisis theology, where being born again is a singular event, a one-time happening with no more conversions necessary? Faith, you see, is a verb that is too often misunderstood as a noun, a stopping place. A neuroscience friend of mine and I have talked about this a lot in recent months. He suggests that transformation requires a place of lowered anxiety where thinking about beginning anew can occur. New consciousness comes from slowing down and, as Wesley put it, living at an even pace and with faith grounded in love. Georgia Harkness reminds us the Christian gospel is not that we are saved ourselves by finding God. It is that God finds us and saves us when we let him. When we are assured that God ceases not to love us, we can watch in patience through the night and wait for the dawn. I believe this is possible in our local ministry settings, in places like Bristol in 1742. It is a regenerative cycle, interruption, stepping away, finding a calm, beginning anew, interruption, stepping away, finding a calm. Conversion alters where we look and what we see. Dr. Willie Jennings of Yale Divinity School tells of being a consultant with a school facing financial hardship. Students and faculty were able to calm down, step away from old patterns, and think anew. Jennings writes, the school was strapped for cash, but there was unused gospel lying all around. The school was strapped for cash, but there was unused gospel lying all around. I perceive United Methodists as God's people who have a lot of unused gospel lying around. I perceive that, like our ancestors in Bristol, there may also need to be a little conversion in how we see. Methodism is not easily classified historically or sociologically. We are one of only one instrument in the Great Faith Symphony Orchestra, but a critically important voice, sharing harmonies that unite personal and social holiness. The temptation is to think that there is an easy solution to our current situation. Why can't General Conference or the bishops or the annual conference help our disorientation? Dr. Harkness would say, we need a great deal more theology, not less. So I join with George Rieger and early theologians like John Vincent and Ted Jennings, who point to a way beyond our current denominational impasse. It is to remember and reclaim the ministry of Jesus, the ministry of the Wesleys and early Methodism, with the least of these. It is here we discover that this is where Jesus continues to be found today. I do not mean the economically impoverished only, but they must be included, for they are central to a contemporary understanding of what it means to follow Jesus. Let me close by sharing with you a story from my ministry. His name was Tony. He would slip in and sit in the back of the sanctuary. He would often greet me after worship. Good morning, Chappie. I was to him a chaplain. He was a military veteran. Good morning, Chappie, he would say. Tony lived in his car. We tried to get him into shelter, but he was more comfortable in his car. One Sunday, as we were welcoming new members, we did that rather frequently. And of course, we went through quite a drill. They had to attend a couple of 3 classes, and they knew the questions that would be asked, and they knew when to come forward. So we were singing that closing hymn, that invitational hymn, and about 15 or 20 people came forward. And they were ready to hear the membership vows and to share with the congregation what mission effort they would be committed to. And out of the corner of my eye, there was, well, it's Tony. He didn't attend a new member class. What? And so I deliberately took the microphone and went to the other end of the line, wanting to start there, hoping the ushers might intercede, but they were much smarter than I was. And we had the membership vows, and then one by one it would go down. They would introduce themselves, and someone might say, I plan to sing in the choir, or I plan to work with Habitat for Humanity, or I plan to cook meals for the youth. And I held my breath as it got closer and closer to Tony. And finally, Tony had the mic in his hand, and he said, well, I'm just here to love people and share my art with you. My goodness. I didn't need to worry at all, except I needed to worry about Phil. I was the one that needed to be converted. I was the one that didn't see Tony as a potential part of our family. Not long after that, on a cold winter night, Tony was found having died in his car. I still remember the service that was held in the chapel. It was overflowing with people he had met, people who had purchased some of his art. We thought we were the only ones to bring the gospel into the world, but it was Tony who helped us discover a whole lot of unused gospel we had been missing. He taught us about being rooted and grounded in agape love. Today, partly due to Tony's interrupting our routines, a shelter and resource center offers food and meals and places of health care for hundreds in that community every week because of people who got to know Tony from the outside in. Our 3 takeaways or trail markers for today are these. First, followers of Jesus are forever beginning disciples acting with agape love. Secondly, rethinking mission from the outside in will need some righteous interruption. And thirdly, as fear is calmed, we may be converted to welcome others as Christ has welcomed us. So tomorrow we'll continue on this trail together with the question, with the topic of how we're connected to bear good fruit and how we are gathered in communities of restoration and joy. When we first planned this 18 months ago or more, the idea was to do a little dialogue, and we were going to have some younger and more experienced pastors here, but that didn't happen for a lot of reasons, COVID being the main one. But I'm encouraging you to ask questions and I'll try to respond. We may not have time today, but let's see if we do, okay?
So I think Andy Lewis has got how we're going to do this, and we may collect the questions today and do that tomorrow. So Andy, you want to make that announcement? I think that's okay with you, Phil? Okay, thanks. Andy? Could you turn Andy's mic on, please?
Very good. Yes. So
Is it on?
we believe that we can.
I don't think it's
have
on.
some Q&A.
It's not on. Yeah.
So while they're coming, I was thinking about technology and all the joys. I don't know how many of you remember Clarence Jordan at Koinonia Farm. Clarence had a master's degree in agriculture, and when he finally started Koinonia Farm, he said the way I learned to farm was I would climb to the top of the barn every morning and see what the other farmers were doing. And his whole notion about technology was, he said, you know, they've got these new chicken houses, and the hens lay the eggs and they drop down on a conveyor belt and they go on down the line. And he said the chicken then looks to see if they've laid the egg, and they haven't, so they lay another one. That's technology often is the way.
Andy?
Okay. So tomorrow, after both of Phil Amerson's sessions, we should have a space for some Q&A and dialogue. If you have questions from today or from either of tomorrow's sessions tomorrow, then submit those through the Q&A. We will gather those up and get them to Phil so that he can speak to them tomorrow.
Great. And I'll be around too if anyone wants to talk.
And we can get those questions now. You can put those questions down if you have some in the Q&A, correct? You say that again? We'll address them tomorrow, right? But you go ahead and put your Q&A in now, and we'll be ahead of the game on that.
So I thank you, Bishop McKee. And
well, thank you, Dr. Amerson.
Annual conference.
Thanks. So what is up next is a video about the State of the Church report. And so I think we're ready for that. Am I correct? So please watch.
This State of the Church report, which is produced by the Connectional Table and United Methodist Communications, is about how our church has dealt with the unique challenges of this time, with the uncertainties those challenges have brought, and still carried out its mission. We have been the Christian community of which Jesus spoke in his Sermon on the Mount. We have been the poor in spirit. We have been those who mourn. But we have also been the church living out a gospel of love and being in ministry with and for a world that has faced untold illness and millions of deaths. We really are at a very special time, where a large part of the world's population has had the same experience of a life-threatening disease. God has called us for such a time as this, to provide comfort and grace and a glimpse of God's kingdom to a world that is suffering. Blessed is the church.
Despite a once-in-a-lifetime global health threat, the United Methodist Church has continued to do ministry. Our pastors who were so used to being with their people, sitting at bedsides of the sick, being with extended families during funerals, instead have had to do ministry in the midst of a pandemic that has done its most devastating work by separating us. Our laity, who were so used to fellowshipping on Sunday mornings, corralling children into Sunday school, singing in choirs and praise bands, have had to learn to sing the songs of the church on a computer and minister to those children over Facebook. All of our people have had to deal with the loneliness and isolation that has come with this pandemic. Yet United Methodists have still done the ministry to which we are called. We have found ways to continue ministering to one another and to reach out beyond the walls of the church to engage the community as never before. Blessed is the church.
Blessed is the church. Blessed is the church. In December of 2020, the church gave almost $40 million to apportionments to support ministry around the globe. It was the highest rate of giving in 1 month in the history of the United Methodist Church, and it came during a global health crisis. It came during a time of economic stress. It came because United Methodists are faithful in their mission and ministry to the world. In his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." And well, blessed are those who have the meekness to give rather than to receive. Blessed are those who are willing to sacrifice so that others may survive. And blessed are those who continue to give of their resources and of themselves, even when under stress. And the unique stresses that began in 2020 have been great. It was not just COVID-19, but fires and floods and political violence and the scourges of poverty and the displacement of peoples. In the midst of this, God called United Methodists to do the most good possible. And the people of this church responded, "Blessed is the church."
Blessed is the church in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The United Methodist Church is spreading the gospel, working to alleviate poverty and suffering, and seeking to bring equity and justice to all parts of life. In other parts of the world, the United Methodist Church is standing up to state-sponsored violence, standing against racism and colonialism, even trying to dismantle racism and colonialism within the church itself. This church continues to feed the hungry, work to heal the sick, visit those in prison, and care for the least of these as if they were Christ himself. Blessed is the church.
Blessed is the church. You are the salt of the earth. Don't become complacent in the face of suffering. Don't be quiet in the face of injustice, and so lose your saltiness. Because if salt loses its taste, then what good is it?
You are the light of the world, a city built on a hill. Our mission and ministry are important because God calls us to let our light shine so that others might have hope. Don't let God's light in us dim because of our disagreements. Blessed is the United Methodist Church.
No one lights a lamp and hides it under a bushel basket. We should not hide our light under our own internal struggles. We can let the light of Christ shine within us and through us so that it can illumine the world.
If we continue to let our light shine, it will draw others to the light of Jesus Christ. And if we continue to hold on to our saltiness, we will be a church that is salt to the earth. If we continue to hunger and thirst for righteousness, to work for peace, to comfort the mourning and lift up the poor, then we will be God's blessing to the world.
Blessed is the church.
Blessed is the United Methodist Church.
So at this time, we move to the Center for Connectional Resources. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our newest Director of Connectional Resources. I started to ordain you right then and there. So anyway, Christy Drenner, of course, who's a clergy spouse, but is our Director of Connectional Resources. Tomorrow during the CFA report, we will vote on electing her the treasurer, which she's already serving as, but we have to do that every 4 years. And so we'll be doing that tomorrow during their report. But she'll be reporting from the Center for Connectional Resources and has some other things to bring to us. So Christy, thank you and welcome to North Texas, at least to the conference staff. You're well aware of North Texas, I know. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Bishop and members of the annual conference. It is a joy to be with you this day to share about the Center for Connectional Resources, or as we like to say, the Ministry of Administration. While it might not always be the most exciting aspect of ministry, we all know how vital good financial stewardship is to our longevity. I would like to pause for a moment and give a shout out to all the church business administrators that might be joining us today. Being married to a United Methodist pastor, I understand your struggle. Sometimes the spirit moves faster than the budget, but I digress. It has been a busy 5 months since I started on January 1st. I'm extremely grateful for my team and all of the clergy and lay members of the boards that I am lucky enough to work with. It has been a challenging spring, but the commitment of these leaders to continue the good work of the conference has been inspiring. For those who might be new delegates, I would like to share a little bit about what our center does. While the annual apportionment budget the delegates will vote on tomorrow is less than $11 million, our center receives and disperses 3 times as much each year. In 2020, the unaudited total was closer to $34 million. Most of these additional funds come from managing the comprehensive pension, health, and property insurance programs. In addition to managing the accounting, we partner with other centers to support the work of the local churches. Here are a few recent examples of our collaborations. One of our insurance carriers provides unlimited access to ministry safe training. Reverend Emma Williams with the Center for Leadership Development and I met with the carrier and are planning to co-lead a back to school webinar to help our churches learn how to take full advantage of not only the ministry safe training tools, but resources related to hiring practices and even website language. Lisa Putnam on our team has been hard at work getting certified as a Salesforce certified administrator so that we can create a source of truth for data, for conference data. We have a few databases that we are hoping to consolidate into one. She has been working with Reverend Jeremy Bassett, the new disaster relief coordinator in the Center for Missional Outreach, on how to build his disaster relief team information inside the platform to maximize efficiency. So when the need arises, they will be equipped to issue the call quickly. In the Center for Church Development, Owen is always busy creating strategies and opportunities to align churches in new and exciting ways. He often says, I was told there would be no math, so he leaves the complex accounting structures he creates to our Center for Management. In addition, my center supports the work of the following committees. The Insurance Advisory Team, which I'm sure all of you are very familiar with at this point. The Board of Trustees, chaired by Reverend Chris Yost, that oversees all of the properties of the annual conference, church closures, and the bylaws of our conference. The Council on Finance and Administration, chaired by Mr. Larry Womack, all accounting and treasury functions. The Board of Pension and Health Benefits, chaired by Reverend Ann Willett, who's about to give her report. As the name implies, we work closely with WestPath to make sure all of the pension plans, of which there are a few, and the health insurance program are well managed and communicated to the local churches. The standing rules and all statistical information are a part of our department as well. In the coming year, I hope to provide regular webinars to review with our local churches some of the policies and best practices related to the important work of the business office. I'm open to any suggestions of topics you might be interested in or learning more about. I would like to emphasize, as I did at the district meetings, that we are here to serve the local church. If you have any questions related to accounting, HR, health or pension benefits, property insurance, and a long list of other items related to business office operations, please do not hesitate to reach out to our team. One item of legislation, Bishop, to bring before you is that of equitable compensation. On page 18 of the conference workbook, you will find legislative item number 3. After all of the statistics are gathered in January, an analysis is done of the average increase in clergy salaries across the conference. It is then reviewed by CFNA and a recommendation is made for DS salaries. Per our standing rules, the percent change of equitable compensation has been tied to the DS salaries. The past 2 years, we have recommended a suspension in the increase in compensation. Due to the challenging nature of the past year, CFA voted to not increase the DS's salaries. Therefore, the minimum compensation will remain at $50,326 with a housing allowance of $12,000. Bishop, the CCR, CLD, and CFA recommend the adoption of legislation number 3.
Thank you, Christy. So again, this is legislative item number 3. It is found on page 18 in your workbook, so you should have it handy there. This is before you, and we're going to take a poll vote on that. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I want you to get ready to vote, and then we're going to provide about 75 seconds for you to vote. But I'll tell you when the poll will go live here in a moment. I don't think there are any questions, or I know of none. So please get ready to vote either yes or no when the poll comes up. So we're ready to go. The poll is up. Please vote yes or no now. Okay, so those voting, there were 98% of the people approved of the equitable comp for the coming year. There was 1 abstention and 1 who voted no. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that it? And Willett is going to come now. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you. I'm Ann Willett. I'm the senior pastor at North Haven Church and also the chair of your Board of Pensions and Health Benefits. Again, as Christy said, this may not seem like the most exciting stuff, but once you have some healthcare needs and once you start thinking about retirements, it's pretty important stuff. So we have had a great year and we are thrilled to welcome Christy Drenner, our new conference director of Connectional Resources, to fill the very big shoes of Reverend Jody Smith. Christy has adapted quickly and led us well in 2021. I call your attention to legislative items 4 through 7 in your conference workbook. Legislative items 5 and 7 are on our consent agenda, so we will vote on them tomorrow. Today, we will be voting on items 4 and 6, and we'll vote at the end of the report on both of those items. So if you have any questions on 4 and 6, you can go ahead and type those into the chat. Item 4 is our proposed budget for 2022, and it's on page 21 and 22 of the conference workbook. There's an overall increase of 1.83%, or about $28,000. The increases are in a couple of line items. Line 83250, the insurance supplement item increased about $12,500. Based on current and anticipated eligibility for clergy on disability. And line 83350, retiree insurance increased 10,000 based on actuarial assumptions. A slight increase is needed. We did have some good news. In 2021, the actuals were significantly lower than budgeted because of a 3-month premium holiday given by Westpath. So that is all I'm going to say about legislative item number 4. Bishop, is this the right time to ask questions about this?
So let's take them one by one.
Okay. Okay, sure.
Do we have any questions, Andy? None at the moment. Let's go ahead and vote on this now.
Okay.
So we're going to be ready to vote, and basically this is the approval of piece of the budget that has to do with healthcare for the most part, correct?
And pension.
And pension benefits. So you have it. There are no questions. So I assume you're ready to vote. I'd like for you to get prepared to vote on your devices, and in the way we're going to do a poll. We're going to have 75 seconds in order to do that. So please prepare to vote, and I will let them know when we're going to put it up. Hold on.
To vote on 4 and 6 at the same time.
You know, I've been corrected or learned something new, one or the other or both. And so we're going to do 4 and 6 together, just like I said.
Whatever you say, Bishop, that's what we'll do.
Did you take that line from Andy Lewis, whatever you said? That's his biggest line. You need to trademark that, Lewis. Okay.
All right. Let's talk about number 5, but we're not going to vote on it because it's on the consent agenda, but I do want to explain it. Legislative item number 5 is the resolution to designate rental housing allowances for retired or disabled clergy, an item that the IRS requires us to approve annually. And this allows covered retired or disabled clergy to use their benefits toward housing expenses, which has some tax advantages. So that is on the consent agenda and will be voted on tomorrow. Item number 6 is the pre-1982 service rate for 2022. Again, the discipline requires each annual conference to determine the rate for the portion of retirement benefits associated with service before 1982. Last year, in 2021, we didn't make any cost of living increases due to the pandemic and economic uncertainty. But this time, we are proposing an increase of 2.5% in association with the cost of living adjustment proposed by the Social Security Administration. So if approved, this will amount to $823 for approved service of clergy included. We've reviewed the financial stability of the pre-82 funds and determined there are sufficient funds to cover the increase. So this would be a time to ask any question about legislative item number 6.
So item number 6 before you is about the pre-82 pension plan and the amount paid per year of service, and they're recommending the increase of 2.5%. I hope Central Texas does that. Anyway, so I'm just saying. Okay, so are there any questions? Do we have any questions? Andy, do you know of any? So there are no questions. Let's prepare to vote. So get your device. Wait a minute.
Can I go ahead and do number 7?
You know, it's.
Would that be okay?
That's fine with me.
Then I'll be done, and then we can vote on the 2 we have to vote on.
Whatever you say.
Thank you. Wait, that's Andy Lewis's line.
I know. He's rubbing off on me.
Item number 7 is approval of our comprehensive benefit funding plan. Some of the decisions that we address on the Board of Pensions depend on actuarial data released by Westpath. And sometimes we don't receive the information needed soon enough to make our recommendations for annual conference. So for this reason, we are asking you to allow our conference Board of Pensions to review, approve, and submit the comprehensive benefit funding plan in the course of our regular meetings. We We have several new board members who are highly qualified and interested in doing a deep dive into this plan. And so we are going to be addressing that in the coming months. This item is on the consent agenda and will be voted on tomorrow.
Thank you. One other item before, so we're going to vote here in a moment on 4 and 6, but one of the things I want to share with the annual conference is we have 2 members from our annual conference who serve on the West Path board and do a very good job. So we're not only are we well represented at the conference level, but we have, I would not call it, we have on the ground information that's very helpful to our conference board of pensions. And so I think that's important to remember. And as I remember, those 2 persons are
Nisha Dexter.
Nisha Dexter and Steve. Just one? Maybe Nisha's the only one now. I think that was different. It's a few years earlier. Okay, thank you. So we're going to vote. So we're voting on legislative items 4 and 6. I want to remind you that, can you remind us what 6 is? The service year rate.
6 is the pre-82 service rate.
And 4 is?
The budget.
The budget for pension and health benefits. So you're ready to vote. We know of no questions. Get ready to vote. We're going to open the poll in a moment. I'm going to give you a few seconds to get ready to vote. Okay, I think we're ready. Let's place the poll up now. You have 75 seconds to vote. Yes or no? Are you voting? Anywhere. 98. So the vote is this: 98% of the people, 98% of the votes were for the approval of both items, 1% abstained, and 1% voted no. So those 2 legislative items passed. The other 2 will be on the consent agenda.
That concludes my report. Thank you, Bishop.
Thank you. So I want to thank both Ann Willett and Christy Drenner for their work. We appreciate it very much. Chris, do you have something else at this time? Okay, so let's show our word of appreciation to these people who work on the behalf of our clergy. So we're making some adjustments in the agenda as we go. We're scheduled to adjourn at this time, but we have 2 or 3 small items that we're going to do prior to that. So bear with us, please. So I think Patty Sullivan is here with CC Young. I knew I'd seen you. All of a sudden, there you are. Just wasn't connecting. So Patty, thank you and welcome. Appreciate you being with us this afternoon.
Well, Bishop and members of the North Texas Annual Conference, I bring greetings from CC Young Senior Living. I am Patty Sullivan. I am the Vice President of Sales and Marketing. And after the year we have had, I have to say it is a true pleasure to be with you in person and to be able to see full faces, not just from here up. It has been quite a year, and I'm sure that that is an understatement for everyone. It's been a bit of a blur for me, having joined CC Young in late July in the thick of the COVID pandemic. But I will say I was immediately impressed with how the CC Young leadership and our pastoral team We're working together and handling a very complex, never experienced situation and doing so successfully. We're glad this is moving behind us, and we believe that the future is bright, especially at CC Young. After 15 long months, we are slowly, carefully, and very thoughtfully opening our campus. And what we're seeing is really exciting. We're seeing more families coming back to be with their loved ones. We're seeing a tremendous interest and increase in tours and visiting the campus. And we're seeing this pent-up demand for the services that we provide, whether it's independent living, assisted living, or some of our other services, such as the rehabilitation, home services, home health, and our hospice services. So as we rise from this chapter in our history, we're really excited about rounding the corner and soon celebrating our 100th anniversary. The planning is well underway, and a key component in our efforts is the successful solicitation of a former CC Young employee and a dear friend of the United Methodist Conference, Kathy Betts. She has agreed to be our unofficial historian and archivist, and we have no doubt that her contributions will be really valuable to us in planning our special celebration to honor Reverend Young and his mission. So stay tuned for the details. It's going to be a fun 4 months of celebration. If you haven't been to the campus in a while, and I'm sure with this past year, that's probably true, we invite you to come and visit. There's a lot happening on campus. We've recently been approved to be a COVID vaccinator, so our residents and employees are very pleased with that. The Vista is now open. That's our newest assisted living and health center. We have another project on the horizon, the Terraces, and in the near future, the Point, which is our hub of activities, will be back in action with a full agenda of life enrichment programs. And we'd love to share all of this with you. In the meantime, thank you very much for allowing me to participate and for CC Young. And with that, I'll turn it over and you will see a little bit about us. Thank you.
The Vista at CC Young is taking senior healthcare to a new level of excellence. The Vista is the only 5-star senior living community within a 50-mile radius of Dallas to hold this distinction in all 4 categories from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The Vista, loving, living, caring. Our new, beautiful, independent living expansion project, the Terraces, is now taking priority reservations. Our residences provide maintenance-free living and give you freedom to live the active lifestyle you choose. The Terraces features a top-floor dining room overlooking White Rock Lake. Each of the 137 apartments will have a balcony or terrace. We invite you to learn more about this unique lakefront living experience. Come in for a tour to see our other unique independent living residential options. CC Young, serving seniors since 1922.
So Patty, again, thank you for being with us today, and thank you for the work that CC Young does with older adults in our communities. Thank you so very much. Samantha Parsons is going to be the last item of business, and we have some announcements to make. It's going to make a brief report from COSRO, the Committee on Status and Role of Women. Samantha?
Thank you, Bishop, Cabinet members, and guests of the North Texas Annual Conference.
I'm pleased to share highlights from the clergy survey that we sent out recently and some other statistics that we can celebrate. Our full report is on page 51 in the annual conference workbook. We will also be publishing more detailed information about the clergy survey as we move into the fall. First, we want to thank generously the 127 of you who were able to participate in the survey, and we are especially thankful for those who are willing to continue the conversation with us as we move forward to accomplish our stated goals. As an extension of the Global Cause Row, we are charged to conduct research and communicate how our conference is progressing to eradicate sexism in the church. Of course, this charge is only possible with the intentional commitment of both our fellow clergy and laity. Clergy, your responses to the survey provided a clearer picture of the state of our conference in this matter of eradicating sexism. And as a committee, we are eager to respond to the needs of our conference churches based on the survey results. Some of the highlights include, first, a clear desire for easy-to-find resources that support pastors and staff in encouraging, enabling, and advocating for women to serve in roles at every level of the church in both clergy and lay roles. We plan to create a web-based resource which will include various tools as well as the list of clergy women and women lay speakers who are available to fill the pulpit should you have that need. And if you are still working on fulfilling the challenge from last year's legislation. Now, if you are a female clergy or lay speaker and you would like to be added to this list, please contact me or the conference and that we will gladly put you on that list. Second, we recognize that we do not have an accurate count of churches who have not yet received a female senior pastor. We will be working with our district superintendents to identify those congregations as well as ways to encourage, educate, and enable these churches to receive a female senior pastor as our conference works together to further our purpose of equality throughout the region. And finally, we want to celebrate the intentional, creative, and loving acts of both male and female pastors who are doing amazing work in communicating the difficult reality of bias and sexism and providing proclamation, teaching, and opportunities to move into the broader, richer life together as the body of Christ, without limiting access to the call that God extends to all baptized Christians, male and female. We also want to celebrate the wonderful example Bishop McKee and the cabinet has set at the conference and cabinet level. We continue to have women leading 2 of the 4 conference centers, Reverend Cammie Gaston for the Leadership Center for Development, and of course, our almost Reverend Christy Drenner for Connectional Resources. And we once again have 2 women serving as district superintendents, the Reverend Cassie Wade in the East District and the Reverend Deborah Mason Hobbs in the North Central. Thank you, Bishop, Cabinet, for demonstrating your commitment to equality in leadership at all levels of the conference. We would like to celebrate the work of the ordained ministry board, who is, we have to celebrate this, equal, male and female elders have been commissioned and ordained over the past 2 years, 11 men and 11 women. That's amazing.
That's the ordained classes?
Both commissioned and ordained
Okay.
together. So both over these last 2 years, the totals. Of course, deacons are exceeding with 9 women and 2 men over the last 2 years, and a slight increase of women who have attended licensing school, 9 women and 8 men, to serve the critical role of licensed local pastors. We are so excited and grateful to see these positive trends in incoming clergy candidates. And in closing, we are thankful to be serving a conference who takes the work of eradicating inequality so that sexism, racism, and exclusion no longer mar the landscape of our kingdom work to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. May the Holy Spirit continue to fall richly in this place. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. We appreciate that very much. So in a few moments, I'm going to adjourn the session for today. And so one of the reasons is we have to get the room back together. And so we do have items that we'll take up first thing in the morning that are left over from this afternoon. So those persons who need to be prepared to do that. Kenny Dixon, who's the conference secretary, do you have any announcements for us?
Yes, sir.
Well, there you are.
We have two announcements. The first is we've been asked to remember Dr. Bill Lawrence, who is in North Carolina. Dr. Lawrence cannot be with us due to a medical procedure he is having in North Carolina. So we would like to remember him in our prayers. Also, for tomorrow morning, the Zoom link that we used today, we will be using the same Zoom link for tomorrow's session. It will be online at 8:30 in preparation for the start at 9 o'clock tomorrow. And those are the announcements, Bishop.
Thank you, Kenny. Appreciate you doing this work. So I want to remind you that our ordination service is this evening at 7 o'clock. And those of you who are watching on Zoom, you're welcome to be present here and to come. I hope that you will. It's an affirmation and a sign of support, I think, for those persons who will be commissioned and ordained this evening. And so I look forward to this important service of worship in the life of our annual conference. There are no other announcements I know of at this time. We'll be getting ready. Those of you who are being ordained and commissioned, you know what you're going to be doing over the next time. We're going to have rehearsal in here in a few moments, and that's an important piece. So I want to remind you of that. I noticed that some of the people who are being ordained and commissioned are not in the room at this time. I hope they've not run off, and I hope they're somewhere in the building because we are going to rehearse our time for the ordination service. I'd like to close us with a word of prayer, offer a word of gratitude for Dr. Phil Amerson for being here and all who presented today. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your reports. And I look forward to being with you again this evening and again tomorrow, for we will have much work to do tomorrow. Let's pray. Our holy God, we give you thanks for this day, which you've created not only for our enjoyment, but also for our service to you. And sometimes the work of the church is work that some can be a little tedious, or things that we think, is this important? But given the scope and of our church's ministry and mission, the depth and breadth of it all, each agenda item we have considered today has been important in not only our present, but in our future as well. So for those who've been with us this day virtually, we give you thanks for their presence with us. For those who've been gathered here in the sanctuary at St. Andrew, we give you thanks for their presence as well. We're also grateful, oh God, for the St. Andrew staff and lay team who've been so very helpful this year in helping us organize and prepare to get ready for annual conference. I pray this in the name of the Christ. Amen.